afternoon. The Sports Minister has again today weighed in on the Ashwin Willemse saga. Tokozile Xasa calling for the suspension of Nick Mallett and Naas Botha following Willemse's walkout on Saturday. She urged South Africans to unite and build a cohesive society while exposing racist elements. But yesterday, SuperSport and MultiChoice said there wasn't any racism involved in the incident. The Minister now says she's sticking to her original statement until an investigation into the matter is concluded. And some social commentators are also saying this is all part of a bigger problem, not only with rugby in South African society, but society generally. So let's explore that dynamic now with Professor Ashwin Desai from the University of Johannesburg, who joins us here on Newsday. Before we get to the bigger picture, and Ashwin, a very good afternoon to you, and thanks for coming in. Maybe let's focus on the minutiae if we can. How do you think that rugby finds itself in this position? Others have told us that this has been an incident simply waiting to happen.
I think we've not dealt with the question of race in sport, and we haven't had an open discussion about it. And I think one of the problems has been the way SuperSport has conducted itself. We have a history of politics in sport, but the kinds of commentary that have taken place around these issues have almost been ignored. So even issues around quota systems, whether it's in cricket or rugby, you never have an engaged discussion. And yet this is often, Jeremy, a minefield in which you want something to unfold.
I think there are two issues here. One is that it's supposed to be the unifier, and post the Mandela days, the Rugby World Cup. So we tend to perhaps see it as a sacred cow. The other thing is that it's very much a holy cow as far as broadcasting is concerned. Perhaps we are afraid to have that conversation.
Well, I don't think we can be afraid anymore because it's always there. And we're making, I think, sometimes incredible errors because we're not having a wider debate around this. I'll give you an example. In rugby in KwaZulu-Natal, they decided that every team had to have at least 3 black players in the club. Good decision. But what the white clubs did was to take players from the only black club in the Premier Division, lost all its players, the only black club was then relegated. Unintended consequence of transformation.
Completely self-defeating.
Exactly. Or there's been a school in Pretoria that is 98% Afrikaans students who happen to be white. They don't meet the quota for the high school cricket team and get left out of the tournament. So we have to have an engagement with this because it's in the public domain.
I get very wary sometimes when commentators such as yourself come on board and they say, well, we need to have a conversation. We need to have a dialogue. We need to seed the process. Surely we've gone beyond that at this point. We need a little bit more than just having a conversation. This is a conversation surely we should have been having for the past 25 years.
Yeah, but sometimes, as cliched as it sounds, better late than never. And I think that's why I don't want to just isolate this as an incident. But it forces us. Just look at the Australian cricket team and just look at the way SuperSport handled that conversation, handled that debate, handled that incident. It was over in a second. Yet it had deeper repercussions about the game, about the racism in the game. That, for example, cricket is replete. When the Pakistani bowlers had reverse swing, it was cheating. When the Australians had reverse swing, it was a mark of genius. So these things are inside of our languages and sport, but we tend to ignore them.
And fundamentally underpinning this, I'm assuming, is that sport the world over is a multi-billion-dollar industry. This would be a organization that has a monopoly hold on sports broadcasting in this country, wanting to preserve the status quo. One doesn't want to get involved in arguments, surely.
Well, I think they will grow by getting involved in this argument. I think it's just not about the multi-billion-dollar thing. I think there is a mindset that because we had so much of politics in sport, the anti-apartheid struggle, that we've got to look beyond that, and sport is some way isolated from other impulses in society. But I think all of us want to understand these debates around quotas, for example, and we like an expression on it in SuperSport and even on ETV. I think we discuss racism, we discuss the main political issues of the day on ETV, but hardly a focus on sport, racism and politics.
And given, as we've said earlier, sport has this potential, if we get it right, to be the absolute unifier in this country.
It has the potential.
It was once, though, wasn't it? Or was that a veneer?
I think there was a veneer. There was definitely a veneer. We wanted to celebrate that. It was a lead by Mandela. But if you even look at the Rainbow team and look at Chester Williams and you look at his biography and you read through those lines in the biography, he will tell you that he was often seen as an outsider and treated by fellow players in the most racist of ways.
Just a final question. This also raises issues of dynamic within the workplace itself. And if you look at the interchange that happened, with the caveat that there's still a lot we don't understand in terms of what preceded the walkout. But having said that, though, it does raise the whole issue of workplace dynamic. And one of the words that was used yesterday was this notion of condescension. It is more prevalent, perhaps, than many of us thought.
I think we sometimes might feel it might not even be there. I feel it sometimes at the University of Johannesburg. The first time I ever walked into a Senate meeting as a professor, I felt, are they looking at me as an affirmative action professor? I then imbibed that sense in myself. And I think often how we conduct ourselves is very important. So it might not be classically racism, but I think sometimes in sport I find this especially. I'm quite involved in cricket, and I've written a book on cricket. Is that
I have read the book on it.
okay, so when Robin Jackman or Kepler Wessels pronounces, then it's a fact. When a black cricketer pronounces, he might not just have that lineage, and there might be a question mark against it.
I'm not going to have the temerity to ask you what you thought was going through Ashwin Willemse's mind, but you have raised a parallel between yourself walking into the University Senate and potentially what he might have experienced in that interchange on the set at SuperSport. How did you deal with that then?
Well, eventually I just through my sheer contribution at these august assemblies was able to start to feel that I was part of a broader collegiality. And clearly my colleagues gave me that back. So it was a two-way process. And I thought, Ashwin Willemse, besides the wonderful placards that my friends mock me about, because it's Ashwin walks out and so on, no relative, I thought he put it brilliantly. He said, although I was an excellent rugby player, and we all know he was brilliant, he was made to feel often he was a quota player, and on SuperSport, he's made to feel like he's a quota commentator.
Back to you.
Yes.
Concomitantly, what you also had to do is you're saying you had to work that much harder in order to gain the respect and to gain the understanding of your colleagues. The tragedy of all of this is that no white professor would have felt that.
Absolutely. Brilliantly put.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, I think...
And what lesson does someone like you have then to impart who's gone through this process?
Well, you know, the idea is that, you know, we just can't wipe out our historic lineages. We just can't wipe out that University of Johannesburg was run Afrikaanse Universiteit and was built like a lager, and those old Afrikaans professors have been there and probably never published through all their lives, and they're still giving lectures that have snot on those lecture notes and so on. So we know that, but there's a history there. They do dominate that Senate, and we need to both be colleagues and challenge it. And I think there's a giving on the other side. But of course, I come from a different sense of empowerment.
Do you think this Willemse thing is ultimately going to be important in terms of where this issue goes? Is this the fulcrum, perhaps, that could change something?
I think it's the way it's been raised. I just hope it becomes, in South Africa, we're just getting used to incidents and analyze incidents.
Yeah.
I just hope that SuperSport takes a step back. I don't know how they know it's not racism already. They take a step back and say, why is it Ali Botha that's always doing the interviews on SuperSport? And it becomes almost Monty Python-esque when Ali Botha interviews Michael Holding, who he offered money to, and Michael Holding refused to come. But Ali Botha cannot go there because he's culpable in that process. You know, you can't have somebody who's culpable in apartheid's history asking questions in the present about change.
Professor Desai, I'm looking forward to the next book.
Thank you so much.
Is it happening?
It's going to happen.
Look.